Most people don't realize it, but they are constantly giving away control in almost every interaction they have. Not in obvious ways, through visible weakness or insecurity, but through something far more subtle and damaging over time. Reaction. The moment something happens, a message arrives, a tone shifts, or a reply takes longer than expected. They respond instantly. They explain themselves, they justify their position, and they try to fix the moment before it has even fully formed. In doing that, they remove the one thing that actually creates power in any interaction: uncertainty, because control does not come from what you say. It comes from what you choose not to say. It comes from It comes from your ability to sit in a moment and resist the urge to resolve it immediately. Most people cannot do that. They feel tension, and their first instinct is to escape it. They feel a gap and rush to fill it. They feel silence, and they break it. But tension is not something to avoid. Tension is where attention begins, and attention is where emotional investment grows. When you react too quickly, you are not just responding, you are collapsing the dynamic. You remove the space where curiosity could have existed. You replace mystery with clarity, and early clarity destroys interest. That is why the moment you stop reacting, everything begins to change. At first, it feels unnatural. Someone says something slightly off, and instead of correcting them, you let it sit. They take longer to reply, you stay quiet. They test your boundaries, and instead of explaining yourself, you remain calm, controlled, and still. That is when the shift begins, because people are used to predictable patterns. They expect reactions, explanations, and access. When they don't get them, their mind fills the gaps. They begin asking themselves questions. Why did they not respond? Did I say something wrong? Are they losing interest? The silence becomes louder than anything you could have said. This is where most people fail because they feel that same tension. Instead of holding it, they rush to release it. They send another message. They clarify intentions. They soften their tone. But every time they do that, they lose a little more control. Because control is about emotional stability. The person who reacts less is always perceived as having more power. Not because they are superior, but because they are harder to read. And the human mind is naturally drawn to what it cannot fully understand. That is why unpredictability creates attraction. Not random behavior, but controlled unpredictability. The kind that comes from being grounded enough to pause before reacting, to observe before responding, to choose your timing instead of being driven by impulse. When your responses are not automatic, they carry weight. When your silence is not forced, it carries meaning. And when your presence is not constant, it becomes valuable. Most people think they need to say more to be understood, believing clarity will create comfort, connection, and trust. But in reality, too much clarity too early removes the emotional pull entirely. If someone always responds instantly, there is nothing left to figure out. No tension, no curiosity, no reason to think about them when they are not there. But the moment you introduce space, everything shifts. When you delay reaction, when you allow silence to exist, you create something rare. Psychological presence. Now they think about you even when you are gone. Not because you said more, but because you said less. And this is where the dynamic begins to reverse. Because now they start investing. They start analyzing. They start replaying interactions in their mind, trying to understand you, trying to regain a sense of control. The more they try to understand, the deeper they go. All because you did not react. But this is where most people get it wrong. This is not about playing games or creating artificial distance. It is about discipline. Emotional discipline. The ability to feel something and not immediately act on it. Because reacting is easy. Anyone can react. Anyone can respond instantly and chase resolution. That is default behavior. But holding back is different. Letting a moment breathe is different. Allowing tension to exist without trying to control it requires awareness and restraint. It requires confidence in yourself that does not depend on immediate feedback, and that is why it stands out. In a world where everyone is constantly reacting, the person who does not becomes impossible to ignore. When you stop reacting, you do not just change how others see you, you change how you see yourself. Every time you resist the urge to react, you prove to yourself that you are not controlled by external triggers. You begin to detach your sense of value from other people's responses, and that changes everything. Instead of reacting automatically, you start choosing your responses intentionally. You decide when to engage. You decide how much to reveal. You decide what deserves your attention and what does not. This level of control shifts the dynamic. People can feel it. They sense the difference between someone who is reacting and someone who is choosing. They feel the difference between someone who needs the interaction and someone who allows it. That feeling creates impact, because people are not only responding to your words, they are responding to your state. If your state is reactive, rushed, and dependent, it communicates urgency. If it is calm and grounded, it communicates stability, and people are naturally drawn to stability. Not because it is loud. Silence from control feels different from silence from avoidance. One feels intentional, the other feels uncertain. So this is not about becoming distant or cold. It is about becoming deliberate, removing automatic reactions. It is about creating space where others expect immediacy, because that space is where curiosity forms and attention grows. That is where emotional investment begins. Once someone starts investing emotionally, they are no longer passive. They become engaged, focused, and involved, all because you did not rush to respond. When you stop reacting, you stop overanalyzing, you stop trying to control how you are perceived. Instead, you become present. You observe more, you think clearly instead of impulsively. That presence creates a completely different energy. People feel less pressure and more curiosity. That naturally draws them in because what they are experiencing is real. In a world full of forced interactions, real stands out. So the next time you feel the urge to react instantly, pause. Give the moment space. Let the tension exist. Allow the interaction to unfold without trying to control every part of it. Because the moment you stop reacting is not the moment you lose control. It is the moment you finally gain it. Silence makes people uncomfortable. Not because nothing is happening, but because too much is happening internally. When there's no immediate response, no clear signal, no explanation to hold on to, the mind doesn't relax. It starts searching. It starts filling in the gaps. It starts creating meaning where there may not be any at all. And that's exactly where everything begins to shift, because most people are used to noise. Constant replies, constant reassurance. They are used to knowing exactly where they stand, moment to moment. So when that pattern breaks, even slightly, it creates pressure. Not pressure that you apply directly, but pressure that builds inside them. Quietly, subtly. And the most powerful part is that they create it themselves. Because when someone can't read you, they start trying harder to understand you. They go back through previous messages. They analyze tone. They look for hidden meaning. They question their own assumptions. And without realizing it, they become more invested than they were before. Not because you gave them something new, but because you stopped giving them everything. That's the difference most people never understand. Attraction is not built through constant output. It's built through controlled absence, not disappearing completely, but removing just enough to create space. Because space is what allows tension to exist. And tension is what keeps someone mentally engaged, even when you are not there. Think about how most interactions play out. Something is said, and within seconds, there is a response. No delay, no gap, no room for interpretation. Everything is immediate. Everything is resolved. Everything is clear. And because of that, nothing lingers. Nothing sticks. Nothing loops in the mind after the interaction ends. But the moment you interrupt that pattern, the moment you allow even a small delay, the entire experience changes. Now there is a gap, and that gap becomes significant because it stands out against everything they are used to. And when something stands out, the brain gives it attention. That attention turns into focus, and that focus turns into emotional investment. All from a simple shift that most people are too uncomfortable to make. Because silence requires trust. Not in the other person, but in yourself. Trust that you don't need to fill every moment. Trust that you don't need to explain everything immediately. Trust that the interaction will not fall apart just because you paused. Most people don't have that trust, so they overcompensate. They talk more. They explain more. They try to maintain momentum at all costs. But in doing that, they remove the very thing that creates depth. Because depth does not come from constant communication. It comes from what happens between communication. It comes from the thoughts someone has when you are not speaking. It comes from the questions they ask themselves. When you are not there to answer them, that is where real engagement lives. And silence is what creates that space. But here is where it becomes even more interesting. Silence does not just create curiosity, it creates movement. Because when someone feels uncertainty, they naturally try to resolve it. They reach out, they re-engage, they invest effort into reconnecting. And that effort changes the dynamic completely. Because now they are not just receiving your attention, they are working for it. And anything people work for, they value more. That is why chasing rarely works. The more you move toward someone, the less reason they have to move toward you. The more you give, the less they feel the need to invest. And over time, that imbalance creates distance. But when you introduce silence, when you create even a small amount of space, that balance begins to shift. Now they have to move. Now they have to engage. Now they have to think about you when you are not present. And every time they do that, the connection deepens, because they are no longer passive, they are participating. But this is where most people make a critical mistake. They see the shift happening and they panic internally. They start thinking, now I need to say the right thing. Now I need to maintain this. And that pressure pulls them back. They overthink, they respond too quickly, they try to control the outcome again. And the moment they do that, the tension disappears. The power was never in a specific action. It was in the absence of unnecessary action. It was in the restraint. Restraint is something most people cannot maintain. They fall back into habit because reacting feels safer. It feels like control, but it is not. It is just immediate relief. Real control feels different. It feels slower. It feels quieter. It feels like doing less when your instinct is telling you to do more. And that is why it is so effective. When someone expects you to react and you do not, it creates a break in their mental pattern. And that break forces attention. They notice it. They feel it, even if they cannot explain it. And that feeling stays with them long after the interaction ends. Because what is unresolved does not disappear. It lingers. It loops. It repeats in the background. That is the power of silence. But only when it is real. Because forced silence feels different. If you are silent but internally anxious, it leaks through. If you are silent as a tactic, it feels unnatural. But when silence comes from calm, when it comes from certainty, it feels grounded. It feels intentional. And that is what creates attraction. Not the silence itself, but the state behind it. Because people are not reacting to what you do. They are reacting to how you are. If your silence feels heavy, it creates distance. If your silence feels stable, it creates curiosity. That difference is everything. And it comes down to one thing: detachment. Not indifference, but detachment from outcome. The moment you stop needing a specific response, you stop forcing behavior. You stop trying to control perception. And that freedom changes your entire presence. Now your words are chosen, not driven. Now your silence is natural. Now your energy is consistent. And that consistency is what builds trust. People know you will not overreact. They know you will not chase. They know you will not collapse under pressure. And that creates a sense of stability that is rare. Most people are predictable in the wrong way. But when you are grounded, your behavior does not shift. You remain steady, and that steadiness creates impact. Because it allows others to feel something they are not used to. Space, room to think, room to feel. Room to come toward you, instead of always being met halfway. And that changes how they engage with you. They become more intentional, more aware, more invested, all without you doing more. Just by doing less consistently. And here is the final layer. When you truly become comfortable with silence, you stop thinking in terms of strategy. You are no longer trying to create attraction. You are no longer trying to manage the interaction. You are simply present. And that presence does everything naturally, because it is not forced. It is not calculated. It is just the result of someone who is not driven by reaction. And that is what makes it powerful. Because people can feel the difference between someone who is trying and someone who just is, and they are always drawn to the second. Because it feels real, it feels effortless, it feels grounded, and that feeling is rare. So rare that when people experience it, they do not want to lose it. They lean in, they invest more, they stay longer. Not because you pulled them in, but because you did not push. In a world where everyone is constantly pushing for attention, not pushing at all becomes the most powerful signal. So when you stay silent, you are not creating distance. You are creating depth. You are allowing space for something to grow without forcing it into existence. And that is why it works. It reflects a different way of being. One that is calm, one that is controlled, one that does not need constant validation to feel secure. And that is what people are really responding to. People do not chase words. They chase the feeling those words create. And when your presence creates a feeling they cannot fully explain, they keep coming back to it, trying to understand it, trying to experience it again. And every time they do, they go deeper, without realizing why. And that is the moment everything changes. When you embrace Stoicism, you learn that life is not about controlling external events, but about mastering your own mind. And yet, many people struggle to apply these principles in the chaos of daily life. Thoughts run wild, emotions flare, and distractions constantly pull your attention away from what truly matters. That is exactly why subscribing to this channel is more than a simple click it, is a commitment to your own practice. Here, we don't just talk about Stoicism. We show you how to live it, step by step, until it becomes instinct. Imagine waking each day with the clarity that nothing outside your control can disturb your inner calm. Imagine facing challenges without panic, without overthinking, without reacting impulsively. This is the essence of Stoicism, learning to see what you can control and letting go of what you cannot. But knowledge alone is not enough. You need constant reinforcement, reminders that guide you back when the world's chaos threatens. That is exactly what subscribing to this channel provides. Every lesson is designed to strengthen your resilience. Consider the moments when you are frustrated by other people, by circumstances, by expectations. Stoicism teaches that these frustrations are not caused by events themselves, but by your judgments of them. By following our content regularly, you create a mental habit loop. You see these principles applied, repeated, and reinforced. Stoicism is not about suppressing emotions. It is about understanding them and responding with intention. We show you how to pause before reacting, how to examine your impulses, how to choose thought over emotion. Every day, life presents small tests. A Stoic faces them with deliberate composure and careful observation. Consider the principle of amore fati, the love of fate. A Stoic embraces everything that happens as an opportunity for growth. Stoicism also emphasizes perspective. Many people suffer because they magnify the significance of events. Daily practice is the key. True mastery comes from repetition, from reinforcement, and from consistent application. This channel is designed as that daily practice. By subscribing, you are actively participating in your own transformation. People encounter triggers constantly: criticism, failure, disappointment. Stoicism teaches that these are opportunities for mastery. Another critical aspect is reflection. A Stoic constantly evaluates their own actions, thoughts, and habits. Stoicism also emphasizes control over desire. By understanding impulses and practicing restraint, you gain freedom. In essence, subscribing is a commitment to yourself, a promise to integrate Stoicism into every aspect of life. Even when challenges escalate, the Stoic practices you develop here hold steady. Your calm presence becomes a tool. Subscribing ensures that you never lose touch with these lessons, so that Stoicism becomes a lived reality rather than a philosophy.